He's the most inspiring person I've ever come across.
Yeah.
He just is the if we use 10% of our brain as a cliche, he's using 75%. He doesn't see the distinctions between, as the PBS ad says, inventor, painter, scientist, anatomist, botanist, whatever. He doesn't see those distinctions.
Yeah.
The Mona Lisa is a great work of science, and those scientific dissections are great works of art. But even then, I've just created a dialectic that he's not participating in. He's just, as the filmmaker Guillermo del Toro said, he's determined to interrogate the universe about everything. And if you think about it, he doesn't have a telescope. He doesn't have a microscope. He's just got his own eye, and he figures out stuff about the workings of the human heart, for example, and the heart valves that can't be proven until we have MRIs in the 1970s. But he's dead right.
Yeah,
just about how the valves work. Exactly right. And he's experimenting on calves' hearts and on human stuff. And he's using water and grass seed to follow the flow. And he's using pieces of silk as a thing. And he's got it. And he's anticipating all these other things. And he doesn't have calculus. I mean, he's way before Galileo, who didn't have calculus either. But before Newton and before Einstein, he's doing stuff with gravity at that level. And he's figuring out that humans can do their own powered flight. He just doesn't have materials light enough to do it. But 450 years later, guess what? Humans learn how to do that. And the art he left behind, though only 20 paintings, half of which are incomplete, are among the greatest works of art of all time. And he's clearly, regardless of your, tastes in painting, he is got the most famous painting on earth.
There's a line in Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. He's thanking one of his mentors. He says for
Did you say Marcus Aurelius?
I did, yes.
He's one of my favorite guys. I don't think, like Twain, but spiritual. I don't think he ever wrote a bad sentence.
I don't either. I think that's got to be, if you're going to keep doing some European documentaries.
Yes, I do.
I'd love to see a Marcus Aurelius one.
Marcus Aurelius, that's really tough then, right?
But he says, I think from Antoninus' stepfather, or maybe his philosophy teacher, but he says, he never let me be satisfied just getting the gist of things.
Yes.
And I feel like that's Da Vinci in a nutshell. He doesn't even know what that word means.
No. So I went to Hampshire College. I went in the second year of its existence. It was an experimental college. Then in 1970, when it's opened, I went in the fall of 71. It's still open, and it's still experimenting and still doubling down on this incredibly secret sauce that it would take me an hour to describe. But their motto, the Latin motto, is non satiscere. To know is not enough. And it's what it just means is that, that's all we do is we kind of accumulate this stuff, but it's the synthesis of it. It's what Leonardo is doing all the time. He's asking questions, but then he's experimenting. And he says he's a disciple of experience, which is, of course, in the good observational Aristotelian tradition you're observing. But this is the Renaissance now. So we've opened up ties to all sorts of places around the world, and we have Muslim influence, and they're mathematicians and they're experimenters. Yeah. So the word in Italian means both, seeing things, but also experimenting on them. And he is, I've never met a more inspiring person. I'm just a broken record.
No, he says somewhere in one of his journals, or he's writing a letter, I forget, but it's like, to do a painting of someone, you have to have dissected at least 3 corpses of similar.
Yeah.
And he's not saying, hey, dissect one or look at a drawing of a corpse. He's like, you have to personally take apart 3 human women to be able to paint the face of the Mona Lisa. And you just get a sense of, Hemingway would talk about the iceberg, like the depth underneath every decision he made, the real knowledge as opposed to the approximation in Da Vinci is just, it's literally incomprehensible.
I made a film in the late 90s about Mark Twain. And I interviewed one of his biographers, Ron Powers, who said that Twain was an enormous noticer. Like, he'd look at you and he could tell just by watching you what was in your pockets, right? And I think Leonardo's like that, but exponentially so. Yeah. That is to say, there's not the American confidence guy that's sort of behind both Tom Sawyer, who's getting his friends to paint his Finn, or Huck Finn, who's lighting out for the territories and coming to some profound understandings about humanity along at the same time. That is to say, the humanity of his partner on the raft, Jim. But he's asking these cosmic questions, and that it's not he's not really saying you have to dissect three bodies. He just says, I cannot paint unless I know how the organs inside a person.
Yeah.
I can paint somebody, but I also need to paint the intentions of their mind. Painting them's easy. Getting the intentions of their mind is how we open the film, is the hard part. And he got the hard part. So all of us out there who've spent parts of our lives making jokes about Mona Lisa's smile, once you see this film, once you get to the scene on the Mona Lisa, you will never, ever make a joke about it again, because incorporated in her is the fact that this person has taken inanimate objects and brought them to life,
Yeah.
which makes him, as the scholar Francesca Borgo says, the Italian scholar says, a painter god.
He's a wizard, man. He's a wizard.
There's something fraudulent about our sort of normal conceptions of alchemy, but when you're really in the game of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, you then have forced us all back onto the question, well, what is the difference? If the sum of the parts is here and the whole is here, what's that? And that's the big mystery of life, where 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2, which it has to make a bridge stand or a house stand or a rocket takeoff. But 1 and 1 equaling 3, which is what we want from our life, our philosophy, our love, our faith, our art. And that's the compelling and improbable calculus that we have to come to terms with. And we need the Shakespeares and the Mozarts and the Bachs and the Twains and the Lincolns and the Leonardos, I would suggest above all else, to give us the roadmap towards that kind of life of inquiry.
But to bring up the humor of Twain there, I thought one of the striking things sort of towards the beginning of the documentary is where one of the Italian scholars says, Leonardo was fun to be around. He was great company. He was humorous.
Yeah, no, that's a French scholar, Serge Bromley. Yeah, he's a work of art before he creates the art. And so you begin to, and we don't have much proof of this in any other triangulations. He's not going to toot his own horn. I mean, there's very little biographical detail. We know about him, born out of wedlock, know that he was probably gay, got arrested for sodomy. So maybe that's has a household of male companions. So,
yeah.
Okay. But very little things, mother comes to visit, he notes, and then, a year later, he lists all the expenses of burying her, and it's like, you want to know more, but in a way it's liberating, because all of that kind of tawdry tabloid stuff just kind of falls by the way. And you just have to say, well, what did he do next? What did he say next? What did he write about next? And none of it was published in his lifetime. It took centuries for people to understand, his towering genius and influence on all that was going on. His most famous painting at the time of his death was probably The Last Supper, which was locked away in a dining room of a monastery outside of Milan.
Yeah.
And, then there's several other paintings that were available, but not that many. I mean, we think of Vermeer with 36 or whatever it is, having few. He's got 20 and half of them are incomplete. That's just amazing. But what he left is so startling. And those codexes, all that voluminous writing, he's lefty, so he's writing backwards in a mirror script, with illustrations. Some of them, the slightest sketches, remind you of kind of the grace that Matisse had, or Picasso, just a couple of lines and you got the emotion. And or super complicated drawings, or the Mona Lisa. You're dealing with somebody who's operating on all cylinders at all times.
Plutarch, who I think is maybe the greatest biographer of all time, he says that you can kind of tell about a person from these like little anecdotes, these little insights that sort of reveal the whole person.
Yeah.
And to me, the one I've always loved about Da Vinci is that he would go into the marketplace and buy birds to let them go.
Yeah. We tell that story. One of our commentators does it. And it's a wonderful, it could actually be apocryphal, and you can tell the way this scholar is saying it that, it's said.
Yeah.
But that is the essence of it. And it's so interesting that because he was born out of wedlock, his father was a well-known notary and sort of accountant / lawyer in Florence. And his mother was more of a lower class peasant variety, contadina, a working woman. Wasn't scandalous for anybody, but it meant that Leonardo couldn't be named after the family names that were used in the family. So he's named after a saint who was the patron saint of freedom.
Yeah.
Which I just thought, okay, we're coming back to the same themes that have animated all of my work. That tension is complicated because what is freedom? Everybody's talking about, don't tread on me, or now don't snack on me, a little kitten. I got a meme the other day of a kitten saying, don't snack on me. That, freedom is two things. It's intention, what we need and what I want. And they're not always the same. And that makes it complicated. And that's where the source of so much of the American story is, but it turns out to be so much of the human story. And Leonardo embraces that in every brushstroke.